The new escalation in the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's Revolutionary Guard says it has seized 2 ships in that critical oil shipping route. And Iran state media saying a 3rd vessel is now, quote, disabled off the country's coast. All of this just hours after President Trump extended the ceasefire with Iran indefinitely. Let's go to CNN's Nic Robertson, who is in Islamabad, Pakistan, where those possible new talks between the U.S. and Iran are on hold. What do you know about these ships in Iran, that the one in particular that was seized in the Strait of Hormuz?
Yeah, I think there are several things happening here, all at the same time. The president said there's divisions inside the Iranian leadership. We are absolutely seeing that play out in real time. On the one hand, you have ongoing diplomacy here in Islamabad, the Iranian ambassador going in to meet the prime minister. And on the other hand, you have the IRGC claiming that it has taken control of a number of ships in the Strait of Hormuz, at least one ship reporting an IRGC vessel coming up, an IRGC gunboat coming alongside of it. No radio communications. The gunboat starts shooting up that container ship. It's severe damage to the bridge. We understand no one injured there. And another ship in the same sort of area in the Strait of Hormuz, not far from the Iranian coastline, also shot up. Again, that ship, the crew, not damaged. But the IRGC here, the military, if you will, the hardliners in Iran, are signaling what we're hearing from the politicians. And the politicians are saying in Iran that the US blockade on the Strait of Hormuz must be lifted. And President Trump was very clear last night when he, in his Truth Social post, extended the ceasefire. He also said, I'm not lifting the blockade on the Strait of Hormuz. Now, how does that play into what's happening in Iran with those leaders there who, the more moderates we might call them, who want to get into the talks? Well, we heard from the foreign minister there, who was the number 2 at the talks last week, saying that absolutely the United States needs to lift the blockade on the Strait of Hormuz. It's clear. President Trump's made that clear. That's not going to happen. We had the leader of those negotiations saying that, from the Iranian side, saying that they weren't going to come into the talks under the shadow of threats. Now, the perception here in the region was clear that President Trump wanted to use the end of the ceasefire as a lever in the talks, as pressure on the Iranians. So it does appear, by extending the ceasefire, the president's taken off that pressure point. However, the Iranians have come out and said, we didn't ask for that ceasefire to be removed. The diplomatic maneuvers here that we see in this city would indicate there's circumstantial evidence to suggest that the Iranians may well have asked for that ceasefire that was put forward by the Prime Minister, that the Foreign Minister here yesterday, that the Field Marshal here contacted President Trump about and he acted upon. But the diplomacy on the ground is playing out here. And the hope here is, contacts I talked to, that the talks can still happen. That optimism is still here.
Colonel, give us some sense of what the rules of war here are and what you make of this latest move by Iran, seizing these ships after the United States seized one of theirs, I think, in the Sea of Oman.
Yeah, this is a very interesting development, Sarah, because what you're seeing is, as far as the rules of war are concerned, there's definitely an escalation here. Now, a country can seize ships if it believes that there is, some criminal activity going on, or there's a threat to their national security or their national sovereignty. So that's going to be Iran's point of view. And in this particular case, what you're seeing is you've got these ships, and now they are basically a bargaining chip for the Iranians. They're coming into these potential talks with ships in their possession. They have a 3rd one, as you mentioned, that's disabled, that could also be seized. So you have a situation where they're going to come in and they're going to take as much advantage as they possibly can of the different ships that are out there, and any ship that's trying to run their blockade. They're going to try to take it over, because they are saying that they can control the Strait of Hormuz and extract tolls and things like that. So that's going to be a significant thing.
Look, Beth, when you're looking at the scenario, there was a report out by the Wall Street Journal, and they basically said the Iranians take Trump for a sucker. How many times do they expect him to play this game before they reopen the Strait of Hormuz in their opinion section? Of course, the president responded with a long rant, angry about that. But is that what's happening here, or is it just this disjointed situation where you don't have, as you said, the final arbiter in all of this?
Well, I think that, while they don't have the final arbiter, we do know that the IRGC is ascendant, right? We do know, and we also know that even before the war, that the IRGC had more power in that state than any other institution. So that is happening right now, and I think that, I wouldn't term it in the way that the Wall Street Journal did, but clearly the Iranians are reading us. They called our bluff and they said, we're not showing up. You didn't, we never said we were going to show up. We're not showing up. And what did President Trump do? He said, we're going to bomb there, we're going to resume bombing, and now we didn't. And so by that, while I think this was absolutely the right thing to do, because resuming bombing wasn't going to get us closer to a negotiated solution, which is the only way we can get out of this, but at the same time, the Iranians take this as us, chickening out.
I want to ask you, Colonel Leighton, there's been a lot of talk from the Trump administration about demolishing Iran's capabilities militarily, its missiles, it's talked about. But we're seeing them parade this ballistic missile, in the streets of Tehran. What do you make of that vision there and what they're trying to say militarily here?
Yeah, so by parading that missile, Sarah, what they're doing is they're saying, we've got stuff. And, as Beth was mentioning, they still have cards. And that ballistic missile, of a type that, we haven't quite assessed yet, is, a potential weapon that they can use. And they can use it potentially for long-range activities. Are they going to go after Israel again? Are they going to go after U.S. targets in the Middle East or beyond? Are they going to go after European targets? All those things are possible. And what the Iranians are saying with this is that they have demonstrated capabilities. And it is kind of in line with what the director of the DIA mentioned in his testimony recently, which was that about half of Iran's launching capabilities, missile launch capabilities, and the actual missiles themselves are still in existence. So that is something that where you talk about destruction, that hasn't directly happened. It has happened in a lot of, when it comes to a large portion of their arsenal, but it has not happened in terms of the totality of that arsenal. So they still have something that they can play with here.
Joining us right now is Republican Congressman Marlin Stutzman of Indiana for much more on this. Let's talk about, Congressman, thanks for coming in. Iran now saying that they want the United States to end this blockade on Iranian ports, and then they'll start talks back up. Do you think the president should lift the blockade? What should be his next move?
No, he definitely should not lift the blockade. One thing we know about this Iranian regime, and again, we're trying to still figure out who's in charge there, is they are a propaganda machine. That is one thing they are good at. They're good at moving the goalposts. They're good at saying one thing and doing another. And that's why I think that the Achilles heel for the regime is the Straits of Hormuz. We have to shut off their cash flow. And by blocking the straits, that keeps the oil and gas from flowing out and funding their war machine. Again, they're good at propaganda. We've seen this from for the last 40 years, and I think that's what's important here, is to be sure that we just simply cut off their cash and force them to find a better solution within their government.
But as a point of clarity, the president of the United States at the very same time has been demanding, as part of a ceasefire condition, that the Strait of Hormuz be opened back up. And you're saying, but the U.S. should now keep it closed.
Well, I think President Trump will keep it closed in order to put the pressure on IRGC. It appears the IRGC military is taking charge. Not sure exactly who the person is at the top of the food chain, but I think that keeping we can't let the Straits of Hormuz be open for some and not for others. And I think what's happening here too is that you have China and Europe and others starting to say they're feeling the effects of this, And so hopefully a broader coalition of countries come together and help figure this out. I think in the long run, the IRGC just simply cannot be the ones in charge of the Straits of Hormuz because it's too big to the rest of the world. We need to be sure that the ships can flow in and out of there, not just for oil and gas, but fertilizer and other commodities as well.